first and foremost, I don't mean to ruffle anyone's feathers. If this happens to reach some people that are real conservationists, some people that are doing great work, I applaud you guys. I'm promoting you as much as I can on all of my social media platforms, and that's what I try to do as a conservationist myself through wildlife photography, through wildlife conservation, promoting those organizations that are going out and doing great work. So, if you don't know who I am already, my name is Jacob Jackson, better known as the Real Herp Hero. In 2019, I founded the Herp Hero Wildlife Foundation as a way for me to give back to the planet, educate the people on individuals as well as organizations that are doing great work in the conservation realm, and kind of, put my foot into the door in some way that felt like the right way for me back then. And as I've educated myself more as both a conservationist as well as a wildlife photographer, I've come across some issues that, always seem like they were like underlying, but as I get more and more into the logistics of things and, starting to donate money to more programs, working with more organizations, I'm starting to find that there's a real truth to conservation, real truth to wildlife conservation, and just the truth that a lot of people, they may have in the back of their minds and they may think are underlying issues, but they're actually much larger issues as we slowly but surely try and move our way into a world where people are more conscious about the environment and the things that we are doing that are wrong for nature. It's starting to turn into a lot of, greenwashing as well as organizations that are trying to use funding from these conservation issues to just raise more money for themselves instead of for the environment in itself. So, first and foremost, the main thing that I wanted to talk about, or just one of the points that I wanted to touch on in the video, was the human wildlife conflict. And as a wildlife photographer, as someone that works with organizations where sometimes kids are able to touch animals, we use a lot of biofacts and we do different things of that nature where children can touch animals, people can touch animals, or I'm even going out and positioning animals in places for a better shot to work with, social media to get more attention based on what I'm trying to do with my work. And, it's a very touchy subject, that human and wildlife contact, because it kind of teeter totters between, is it good for me to be out here messing with these animals and doing these surveys and getting these studies done for population densities, or possibly even to get an idea on, why this specific species is in this specific region, and just how dense are they in that region, and why aren't they in this area that's, a few possible meters or even miles downriver. And, that human wildlife contact, it really comes into play when I did some work in Peru. I was in Peru for 4 weeks, and you notice that there's a lot of indigenous communities that have been in these areas, in these plots of the jungle, working and farming for generations upon generations. And we step in as kind of like the middle people between those two and try and educate them on the planet and how important it is to preserve the things that they may have been taking advantage of previously. But it also stands to beg the question of, at what point are we encroaching upon the territory of these indigenous communities? And, being in the middle of Peru, there's indigenous communities out in the middle of the jungle that have been maybe seen once or possibly studied once by one individual that no one's ever seen before. And it's kind of like, okay, where do we weigh the odds between the people that are doing this conservation work, these indigenous communities that are out here in the middle of the jungle that just need to live, and the two are possibly work that comes to intermingle those two. And, it stands as just an interesting point in the truth about conservation, that it's kind of like, as we get more and more into these jungles, as we get more and more into these deserts, these different biomes and things of that nature, there's a large gap between, what we should be doing out there for conservation work and what's actually getting the work done. And, the indigenous communities that deserve to still live in these areas and have the ability to hunt and live the way that they used to, thousands and thousands of years ago, possibly even up to this date. And, just us encroaching upon these communities, it can lead to a loss of culture, identity and livelihoods, just due to the fact that we are now, promoting the work that we're doing out here for conservation. And these indigenous communities haven't seen people, they haven't seen camera equipment, they haven't seen the equipment that we're bringing out there to do these studies on animals. And it stands to educate people and show them more of what's going on in our natural world. But it also brings more individuals, more volunteers, more things of that nature out into these communities where these indigenous people are now intermingling with individuals that they may have never met before. And it's just a very weird teeter totter between what's good conservation and what's kind of that middle point between bad conservation and decent conservation. And as well as on the topic of the human and wildlife conflict, there's the killing of animals that are coming into contact with people as our population continues to increase and increase and increase and increase. And it's going to keep going up, unfortunately. But as we have more and more people, that means we need more and more farms. We need more and more livestock. We need more and more corn, vegetables, fruits, and things of that nature. And these animals that are out in these natural places where people are building farms are doing what they always do. And, we take advantage of the land, and we may grow crops, we may grow cows, we may have pigs, we may have all these different livestock species. And, those elephants, those lions, those tigers, and all those different animals that are naturally out in those environments are going to be coming into contact with that livestock. And now it stands as a farmer, on the conservation realm, because as a farmer, of course, you're living off the land. So conservation is kind of it intermingles with everything that you do, even if you may or may not think that you're doing some sort of conservation as a farmer. You're doing the world a justice, as long as it's not, like a huge methane producing cow farm in the US where it's just like a huge conglomerate. Then those small scale farmers are the ones that I'm speaking of in Africa, that may have pigs, cows, things of that nature. And you have lions and stuff that are coming into your areas, or possibly even elephants that are coming into your areas and destroying crop fields, destroying all your livestock animals. It's just a very weird teeter totter as a conservationist to have to stand in between that farmer and you yourself and the animals in question, because it's now like, what are you supposed to do when this is how people have to live? There's people that, the only way that they make money is through these farms, and all that we want to do is protect the animals. So, how do we as conservationists, stand in between those two very weird intermingling things, and do our job the correct way to make sure that we're not harming us as a people and still benefiting the environment. And the next point is one that really stands really, really firmly with me, as someone that focuses heavily on microfauna and flora and things of that nature. The megafauna, which are going to be your lions, your tigers, elephants, giraffes, things that people are a lot more, noticeable of when they may go to a zoo or watch Nat Geo, those larger animals that just, they get your eyes directly right to where they're supposed to be, and they make you just want to listen a lot more. As a conservationist, someone that's super super into frogs, as you can see from the t-shirt, it stands to beg the question of, you know, we need more conservationists that are focusing on these smaller animals, these animals that, build up the tree that slowly reaches up to these larger megafauna animals. And just focusing on the charismatic megafauna that we were speaking of previously, and not the less glamorous species like the frogs and the turtles and the birds, the smaller birds like hummingbirds, things of that nature, and all these different other species that people may see, but they forget because they're not those huge beautiful animals that you're used to seeing at a zoo. The imbalance between those two tends to lead to a lot of neglect for the equally important species like the frogs on my t-shirt. And as someone that's super into reptiles and amphibians, it's something that I kind of struggle to post about a lot more, because a lot of my work is with these frogs, is with these snakes and things of that nature. But I'm trying to get my foot into every single door that I can with these different organizations to amplify the points that they're trying to get across for the conservation that needs to be done for all of these animals, both the microfauna and the megafauna. In some cases, growing up, I was always really, really into animals, and I used to, as a kid, do some research into some of these large scale conservation organizations. And I'm not speaking about any of these in a negative way just because I haven't done any of this research in a while. But just for example, the WWF, or possibly even like some other larger conglomerates for global conservation of all animals. They get a lot of, and I mean a lot of donations. A lot of money comes in, a lot of money goes out the door, a lot of things get written off, and it's just, it's hard when you're a small scale organization such as myself, and you reach out to these organizations, like ones in Peru like Fauna Forever, or ones in Costa Rica like the Cloud Forest area that I was up in near San Gerardo, which is in Rivas, I believe, Rivas, Costa Rica. And I was up in the Cloud Forest, the mountains up there, just working with a small scale organization that gets in a lot of volunteers, researchers, scientists, biologists, you name it. Everyone goes there to see, different species of birds, hummingbirds, frogs, snakes, do surveys, all in a reforested area that's absolutely gorgeous. But it just stands to tell that a lot of these small scale organizations, they're not getting the same funding that these larger ones are, and they're the ones that are out there with people that are dedicating their lives for years, if not possibly months, to preserve these forests and preserve these frogs and preserve these big cats and things of that nature. And it's just, seeing organizations like WWF, and I'm not saying that they've done anything that's super off-putting, but it's just the only one that I can think of right now. There's a lot of corruption that comes with the conservation realm, and that's one of the biggest truths about it is, a lot of these organizations, these larger ones, they get a lot of funding, and a lot of people have absolutely no clue where that funding is going to. And it's another point that I kind of wanted to touch on, which is with pseudo conservation. And that's basically just, a lot of organizations are getting in these large amounts of funds, and getting these funds from organizations that are going to help them, or that they're going to help with research, education, and advocacy for whichever wildlife or nature based thing that they're wanting to work with or possibly support, and just bring attention to it, and get the work done it needs to be done to make sure that we're preserving these species or preserving this part of this specific area in the world. Yeah, and another point that I wanted to touch on was pseudo conservation. So, pseudo conservation groups are going to raise funds for research, education, and advocacy, whereas the real conservation groups are going to draw a direct correlation between their actions and the improvement or increase of a certain population or numbers. So, this is where I kind of draw a weird line between zoos and organizations that are actually out in the field producing more animals to re-release into the environment. So these tigers, these lions, these cheetahs, these big cats, these giraffes, rhinos, all of these animals that are bred in captivity here in Maryland. And if you've ever seen tiger, oh, not Maryland, sorry, here in the U.S., or possibly even these larger countries like China, or anywhere in Asia, they breed these animals, and they're basically moved about throughout the different zoos, the different AZA accredited places, possibly even the other small scale ones, like ones you may have seen in like Tiger King or something of that nature. And what they're doing is, they're raising money for conservation, and they're doing the research that needs to be done, but they don't do a lot of work, at least with the few that I've looked into. They don't do a lot of work with actually reintroducing these species back into the environment. And, that's a weird conversation in itself, because is their environment even still there? There's environments and areas throughout the jungle that have been completely gold mined and destroyed, where one species of frog may have lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And now, because we gold mined the stream and it polluted the river so bad, these frogs and these animals are no longer in these areas, so we can't even re-release them back into the wild. But I'm more so speaking about things like tigers, things like lions, things like these giraffes, or things like these rhinos, where we can release them back into the environment, but we're breeding them so much heavily in these zoos in the US and all throughout the different larger continents, and we can't re-release these animals back into the wild. So it's like, as a conservationist and as someone that's doing all this research, someone that's breeding these animals, bringing these Javan rhinos into the US or possibly even these larger uh, zoo areas, we can breed them and we can't re-release them. And as conservationists, it's just a weird another one of those weird teeter totters between, okay, we're breeding them here and we've got a few of them, but now how are we going to get them back into their natural environment because they're here in the US and we have to re-release them back into Africa? Or they're in Africa but we can't re-release them due to poaching, and we can't re-release them due to these farms that we were speaking about earlier where people don't want rhinos, coming into their crop. And it's just, as a conservationist, there's a lot of truths that come with all of this good that seems like it's being done, because for every one good thing that you do, there's three things that can possibly make it wrong, or for every three things that you do are good, there's six things that could possibly make it wrong. And it just stands to beg the question of just how much good are we doing, and what can we do to really change and make conservation really worth it in the long run for a lot of these species. And of course, there's conservationists that are out there doing great work, like with bald eagles in California. Those were almost hunted, or I believe poached to extinction, and then we bred an absolute F ton of them, and then re-release them back into the wild. Slowly but surely we built up that population, and now they're back in regulated numbers. And those are just great examples of conservationists doing what conservationists are supposed to do. But then there's these middle points, these margins in between, all the good work that we're doing, where some of these questionable points come into play, for me at least. And I'm not sure how others may feel, just because this is all opinion based and I'm not super well versed in any, specific realm of conservation. I just stand as someone that wants to highlight the work that people are doing for our world. And these are just some of the questions that I've come up with after working with some organizations that I just felt like just need to be put out there. And I feel like a lot of these points kind of all bounce off of one underlying thing that, seems to be the issue with, us as a people, which is just money. There's people that need money, so they go out and poach. There's people that need money, so they go out and gold mine. There's people that need money, so they allow people to hunt animals, so they can have the funding, so they can go out and protect the species. There's people that need money, and they want to bring animals back from the dead, and that kind of touches on the next point that we wanted to get into, which is de-extinction, and the role that we feel like we need to play in animals that have already been, possibly eliminated from our planet due to our wrongdoings. And it's a it's a nifty one to bring up, because de-extinction kind of, it teeter totters that, that thing that we've been mentioning this whole time, a weird dynamic between us kind of playing the role of God, and also, what we've already done as a people, the wrongdoings that we've already caused. Say for example, I think they just found like the blood or possibly even the semen of like some sort of extinct species of mammoth or something of that nature, or possibly even like a saber tooth, one of those two species. But I know I had seen it on Instagram, and when I saw it, I'm kind of like, it sounds cool, but I mean, the most that we can do is just release these animals into zoos. There's absolutely no way that we're going to bring a species back from the dead and just re-release it back into the environment that we've created today, with all the pollution, all the deforestation, all the logging, all the gold mining, all the everything that we've caused as a people. And we decide that, we want to do all this excavating, find these animals, get this semen, possibly fertilize an egg, and then bring this animal back. And it's like why? Like, we're bringing them back just to possibly kill them all over again. Like, it's the sad truth, and it's not even funny, but it's like we're prioritizing a certain species over the other species that are already here, where that funding and that work needs to be done into these species instead of trying to bring back something that we've already destroyed just to possibly destroy it again. And, that also kind of weighs into the whole trophy hunting thing. My uncle does a lot of work with this organization, and he's actually the CEO of an organization known as NRL Hunter, which is the National Rifle League Hunter, not associated with the NRA. And what they do is, in between the hunting seasons, they allow hunters to basically get some practice on like targets that are specific distances away out in the middle of these forests, and give them practice in between these hunting stages that people can come out and compete in. And I think it's amazing. Like, it's amazing work that he's doing, and giving hunters the ability to practice in between all this work that needs to be done. But just hunting in general for animals, I'm not super against. But when it comes to people that pay millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to go out and hunt rhinos or giraffes or lions or tigers or all these animals that are keystone species to making sure that conservation and educating people on animals is even possible. Without lions, tigers, bears, giraffes, rhinos, cheetahs, leopards, all those animals that kids are familiar with, people are familiar with. Without all of those, there's absolutely no way that conservation would even be possible, because we have no way to bring those people in to something that we deem, so important. And it's weird because it generates a lot of funds for these organizations that need money to do more work in conservation for the species that are possibly getting hunted. And it's just a super weird dynamic, but it's another one of those truths about conservation, is that a lot of what we do and a lot of the funding that you'll find for any sort of state-bound Idaho, Minnesota, sorry, not Minnesota, Missouri, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, all these different wildlife conservation organizations and these state government founded organizations, they get the vast, and I mean the vast majority of their funding from the hunting programs that they offer during the hunting seasons, whether that be turkey, deer, boar, or any species that are native to that state. The vast majority of their funding, if not almost all of it, is going to come from hunting and what they have going on, especially for all of those middle states like Idaho and Montana and Washington, which is obviously up on the top of the west side. But all those states where there's not a large conglomerate of people and they have some sort of fish and game, the vast majority of their funding is going to be coming from hunting and the conservation aspects that come from hunting. And it's a sad truth, but there's a lot of money that comes from allowing people to hunt animals and regulating populations. And it's just another one of those teeter totters. Another one of those weird things where it's kind of like, okay, we can't just continue to focus on, removing these animals and regulating populations, when the only reason that we need to regulate populations is because there's no wolves, there's no bears, there's no coyotes, there's no natural predators due to the fact that we overhunted them so long ago. We're still hunting them, not to mention pollution, deforestation, these farms where these coyotes or these wolves come and people kill them, and nobody ever knows that they're now no longer a part of this pact that someone was keeping track of. It's just all this super weird, huge dynamic, and everything stems back to money. And of course, we're going to touch on this one. Just focusing on climate change as a conservationist, someone that, you know, is super into our planet, super into the natural world, and very linear on what's going on with climate change. It's it's one of those things, man, that just, unfortunately, as we get further and further along with, you know, destroying our planet, which is just the simplest way to put it, those baselines are shifting on what type of conservation efforts are actually working in the long run. Because, as we continue to push for conservation of these specific species, and as we continue to try and breed these animals to be released back into the wild, climate change is working 10 times faster than we are. And it's something that, I've struggled with a lot, as someone that's super into the planet and someone that wants to do everything that they can to preserve these species, to preserve this natural world. So when I have children, that they have the ability to see these animals on Nat Geo, to learn about Steve Irwin and see all the work that he did, and just possibly even have animals in their home that I did as a kid, and just be able to see, the beauty that comes with that comes with the natural world. It's hard for us to keep up, man. And that's a cold hard truth, as we do three things right, pollution and deforestation and ocean temperature changes and gyres moving in different directions and all these different things that are happening as climate change is getting worse and worse. These hurricanes that are slowly going to be affecting more and more states up the coast into California as well. California had one of their first hurricanes in who knows how long, and it wasn't necessarily a hurricane, but the fact that you even hear those words over there is just insane. When over here I was so inept to it, like I was just used to, oh, we have a hurricane incoming, okay, we need to prep these things. But over there it's kind of like you come to that realization that this shit's happening. Like there's no games being played. There's billboards up in New York City that are telling you that we need to fix things now and we only have this many days left. And as a conservationist, the cold hard truth is these methods and these things that we're doing now for the preservation of the natural world, they are very small scale to what's going to happen once things get as bad as they are going to get. And it's not just on conservationists, it's on, if you're watching this, you as a person, to educate yourself on the small steps and the things that you can do to assist our planet and stop these large scale corporations from, for one, basically killing you with the things that they're feeding you, for two, allowing things to be as terrible as they are as far as just the quality of ingredients and the chemicals that you're ingesting and the all the different things that they're doing to penny pinch and make more money when things could be a lot more natural. A lot more natural. And I don't mean that to say that, things being natural is going to automatically make everything perfect, because it's another one of those teeter totters where if we do everything naturally, we lose a lot of jobs and we have to feed a lot more people with things and ingredients that are going to be a lot more fresher, which isn't necessarily completely possible considering how many people need to be fed. Like, there's billions of people. So, just as a conservationist and exposing another one of those truths is, we're doing great work, but climate change is doing great work in itself to just absolutely wreck everything that we're trying to fix. And it's a cold hard truth, and the anxiety that comes with it on the day to day. Excuse me, I'm going out to work with these organizations and seeing the absolutely amazing work that they're doing, the kids that they're bringing out, the education that they're bringing to all these different communities, black, brown, white, Hispanic, Asian. It's amazing to see all the great work that they're doing, but there's this mental clock that just every single day that I wake up and I don't get a lot of work done for conservation, it just makes it harder and harder to wake up and actually want to do this work, because I know that it's all going to be in vain if we don't wake the fuck up, man. Someone that's just in love with the natural world, this was one of those things that I kind of spoke on a little bit before that's just heart-wrenching to me. It's the utilitarian approach that comes with conservation, or excuse me, the Western versus indigenous knowledge base that comes from the ideas or the things that we do to conserve species, to conserve specific areas of the environment. As a lot of conservation comes from the Western science and perspectives of, we'll be honest, white individuals, it makes it very hard as a black man and someone that supports these indigenous communities, someone that supports these people that were living in these places for hundreds of thousands of years prior to us coming there and deciding we need to save this species and we need to do it now. There were indigenous communities that were there that already highlight and that focus and really shared a love for these animals. And we come in and we want to conserve these species, but we don't factor in the fact that these indigenous communities have been there and have already been serving these species in this part of the environment because they know that land is so important to life and how the two intermingle with each other and just how much so that without that land there is no life because they live off of it. And that's where I feel like as a people, outside of these indigenous communities, outside of these individuals that are educating themselves on the environment, the natural environment, in ways that you can live without having to go to the grocery store or go out and eat every weekend. They're doing what we've always been taught and know how to do, but it's a lost art because these things are so easily obtainable. Because society has pushed us to go out and buy dinner, to go out and buy groceries, to go out and purchase. Like the money aspect is where it touches on again. And as a conservationist, as someone that's worked with organizations that are in the land of indigenous communities, I've seen where they've taken steps to do great work to keep them included in the work that's being done. And I've also seen them take steps to do the complete opposite and basically give them a big fat. And it's sad, man. Like where I was in Peru with Fauna Forever, and this is an organization that I'm going to forever support, outside of the fact that I have great friends that still work there. During COVID, and a lot of conservation organizations during COVID, because they're not bringing in volunteers, because they're not bringing in researchers, because they're not bringing in scientists or photographers or anyone that wants to come and visit and see animals, they have no funding. The government doesn't give a lot of these small scale organizations that are doing great work for species in these specific niche environments, they're not getting funding, which means that these indigenous communities and these people that lived in these areas prior to when they came there and decided that they wanted to conserve this piece of land, they usually don't give them access to that land anymore. It's now owned by this organization, and if you're there, you're poaching or you're encroaching upon a territory. Versus with Fauna Forever, during COVID, those indigenous communities, those farmers, those people that are living off the land, they allowed them to take advantage of the jungle and plant more plantains because that was their main crop that they were selling to make money, to make a living. And in doing so, they supported those indigenous communities. As a conservation organization that wants to prioritize the environmental well being of both the people and the planet, they did the right thing. And I feel like there's a lot of conservation organizations that are scared for people to know the truth of what they've done to save these animals. And, sometimes I'm all for it, but, as a species, as a group of individuals that have done so much wrong, but we also still have so much love for each other, you've got to factor in both things. You just have to. As I stated in the beginning, none of these points stand to attack anyone. None of these points are unjust or things that one specific organization is doing that are so terrible for the world. I support education conservation in every aspect that it comes in. But when funding is lost, when ethical dilemmas are raised, when moral dilemmas are raised, and when the root of why conservation organizations are doing their work aren't questioned and people aren't holding these organizations accountable, that's just where I feel like we need to step in as a people, as conservationists, as humans, to let the people know about, yes, these things are complex. Yes, they aren't possibly inclusive of all people, but on the ethical and sustainable approaches that organizations are bringing that, kind of tie the knot on everything that I mentioned, these organizations need to be supported fully and wholeheartedly because they don't lose sight of the mission here, which is to save the planet and to save the people. And the only way that we're going to be able to do both is to educate people on the correct ways to do things. And the truth about it is, there is no correct way to do it. There's so many different methods that we can use to support these organizations, so many different methods that these organizations can use to conserve species, conserve environments, to save nature in itself. But then there's so many ways that these things can be taken negative in a lot of different aspects. So, as conservationists and as we come up with these strategies, we just need to have a lot more coercion between each other. Some more speaking that needs to be done. Work with these organizations that are doing the work the way that you want to possibly do it in the future. And not focus so much on the funds and the money that are coming in to make these things possible. Because everything's possible if we work together. I've been dead broke. And I mean dead broke. And I've traveled. I've shot videos, I've shot photos of animals that I never thought I was ever going to be able to see. And I'm not making $100,000 a year. I'm not making $1 million a year. But the moment that I am, this page is going to do a lot more work than what you guys see now. We're going to be reaching out to these organizations. We're going to be doing great work. We're going to be supporting them in everything that they need to get done and educating the public on these people that are out there for years, and I mean years, to possibly get one shot, to possibly find that one animal, to possibly stop that one organization or that one poacher from killing what could be the last animal on the planet. And in doing so, we're going to possibly give other conservationists the ability to see ways to conserve our planet that are effective, just, and all around good for us as a people. If you guys have made it this far, man, as always, I appreciate you for supporting me, man. I just had some things on my mind that I needed to get out in video, and this is going to be a long one, so if you did make it this far, there's some points in here that may seem a little bit confusing, that may be a little bit off-putting, and everything comes from a good heart, I can promise you. Like, I've put the work in. I've spent hours out in the field. I've talked to conservationists, black, white, Hispanic, Latino, Asian. I'm here to do a good deed, man. But there's just some truths that need to be exposed. You guys stay safe, man. Herb Hero, signing out. Ciao.